This is Mr. Hannon with What the Format. Today I want to go over a way to find the vertex of a quadratic equation or quadratic function that is called x equals minus b over 2a. So please recall, in the quadratic formula, you end up with this. Okay, notice that if we were to break this up, we have negative b over 2a plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Now, it's not typical to unadd fractions, but that's exactly what we did here. Now, at the vertex of a parabola, of a quadratic, this part doesn't exist. So what we have is negative b over 2a. This is the equation of your axis of symmetry. So you can take a quadratic and you can complete the square to put it in vertex form. Okay, you can factor a quadratic, but clearly, we have quadratic formula because some of these they don't factor, okay, or they don't complete the square as easily. So we have this. Now, x equals minus b over 2a, like the quadratic formula, works for every quadratic. So let's just do a quick example. Let's say we have x squared plus 5x minus 3 equals 0. All right. Now, normally, we like it to have even numbers for the b, but obviously that doesn't always happen, and here's an example where it doesn't. So how would I go about this? Well, you start with x equals minus b over 2a. Well, just like with the quadratic formula, that you need to know where your a, b, and c are. Remember, your a is the number in front of the x squared, your b is your number in front of the x, and your c is the number in front of there. Well, we need the c for the quadratic formula. We do not need the c for the axis of symmetry. You just need your b and your a. So that's minus b, okay? In this case, my minus b is what? If we fill that in, it's plus 5. The opposite of plus 5 is minus 5. My a is 1, which you could write in there if that helps you see it. Okay, 2 times 1, so that's negative 5 over 2. Okay, that's now my axis of symmetry. So if I'm graphing this quadratic now, okay, I'm going to do my graph heavier on the, okay, minus 5 over 2. This might be a case where either a decimal or a mixed number helps you. That's minus 2.5. It's also minus 2.5. Okay, so we go over minus 2.5, halfway between. So halfway between negative 2 and negative 3, there's my axis of symmetry. Now, how do I graph from there? Well, this is where you need to understand, whenever you have an equation and you want to graph it, what values do you get to pick? You get to pick your x values. Now, we want to pick x values that are around our axis of symmetry, okay? Now, in a normal quadratic, the base points we would pick, negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, and 2, those only really work when my axis of symmetry is the y-axis, the line x equals 0, okay? In the absence of the quadratic function being centered on the y-axis, that's why we find the axis of symmetry. That tells us what we center around. We want our xy table to be centered around this. So if I'm making an xy table here, okay, I'm going to do negative 5 halves. Why? Because that's my vertex. You need to have your vertex. You want your vertex, okay, on a quadratic. Now, after that, you need 2 more points, but sometimes 4 more points, just depending on the shape of the parabola or the complexity of it. So what goes after minus 5 halves? Well, I got minus 2, right? And whatever I get at minus 2 is the same at minus 3. Those points mirror. So if I plug negative 2 in, I'm going to get 2 points. Well, what goes after negative 2? Negative 1 or negative 4. So plug negative 1 and negative 4 in. But of course, you only have to do those 2 because those mirror. So I got to plug negative 5 halves in here. I know that's not fun, but hopefully by this time you're good at fractions, or you can use a calculator. So if we have minus 5 halves squared, okay, I've got minus 5 halves. I'll put that in there. That's squared. I've got 5 times minus 5 over 2 minus 3. Well, that's minus 2.5, and minus 2.5 squared is 6.25. Okay, then I've got that. 5 and minus 5 negative 25 over 2 is minus 12.5. Minus 3, So if I subtract those, that's minus 6.25 minus 3, which is minus 9.25. So I'm down here somewhere, if that's minus 9, okay, minus 9.25 is just under it. And it doesn't have to be exact. Usually a lot of times I just say sketch your graph. So there's my 1 point. Now at this point, if it's me, okay, I'm just going to plug in -1 and -4. I don't even need to plug in -2 or -3 because I just need 2 more points, and they just have to be far enough away from the vertex to see what's going on. Well, -1 and -4 look like a nice set of points. Okay, so and -1, a lot easier math. What's -1 squared? Well, -1 squared is 1. 5 times -1 is -5 minus 3. Okay, so that's 1 minus 8, which is what? -7. So if that's -5, -7 is probably about right there, yeah? And so that's at -1. Maybe my scale is a little off, but you can always adjust your scale. And of course, hopefully at this point you also have graph paper, which makes it easier to see. And then all you have to do is just connect the dots. You know what's going up, okay? And then if you're looking at the y-intercept here, plug 0 in here, you got 0, -3, so maybe I'm a little off. But again, most teachers, if you sketch it like that, they're going to be fine. They're not going to really hit you too hard. If you want to fix that arm, because you want it to make sure it goes through -3, right? So 3, 4, 5, 6, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So just to make sure it goes there, right? And again, the cool part about that is if you want to hit that point over here, you can fix the arm, because you know they mirror, right? And that's close enough, so you can just fix it. Boom. Okay, but like I said, this is a sketch. You want to try to make it as much of you as possible. At this point, probably what I would do is say, okay, that was my rough draft sketch. I'm gonna to the side of it do another graph over here. Now that I got my points, right? I got this was minus 9.25, and that was -7, so that was -7. And then I did 0, what? -3. So then mirroring that at -5, -3. So you could go and you could fix your graph. Okay. In fact, let's just do that real quick. Now I know where my points are. Think of it like an English paper. You did your rough draft of your paragraph, you found some mistakes, you fixed it, now you want to clean it up. And since I'm on the negative side, I'm going to clean over here, so let's get the scale right. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? I'm at -2.5, which means I'm right there. 9.25 is right around there. There's my vertex. Okay, I went to -1, -7, yes, which should be right there. -4, -7 should be right there. 0, -3 should be right there. That should be right there. Look how I've gone, and that makes it easier for me now to come down and see my U. Ta-da! And I just cleaned it up. Okay, it's something a lot of students don't do. They don't take that extra time on a problem just to check it and get it right. Okay, but here's where the x, the minus b over 2a comes from. It's your axis of symmetry equation. So similar to the quadratic formula, you can use it to find any axis of symmetry. You plug that number in, you find that, that's your vertex, and then from there, just find points to the side of the axis of symmetry. I would have, normally I could start with -2 and -3, but see, when I moved over, see, -2 and -3 wouldn't have really helped me at this point. They're too close to the vertex. So at that point, since you only 3 points, I got those 3, and that was enough. But I was thinking, oh, that's not maybe going up enough. 0, -3 is an easy point. Just go it in there, just calculate it, mirror it. When do I know to do that? You're asking. Well, you decide. If you feel like those 3 points are enough, and you like the parabola, and you feel your teacher's going to give you credit for it, then it's good. If your teacher asks for 5 points, then you got to give 5 points. But sometimes they don't specify. They just say, find the vertex, sketch a graph. And sketching a graph is not the same as exactly graphing it. Sketching a graph, it needs to look just close enough, okay? Because sometimes, a lot of times with sketching a graph, like numbers 9.25, it's hard to get it exact, okay? And at that point, I didn't maybe even need to do this, but it was an easy point, so I figured why not, okay? That's just me being particular, okay? And those are things you get a feel for as you go. But this is why you practice and you make mistakes, so then you can figure out, well, what did I do wrong and what do I fix the next time? So notice when I went through the first time, I didn't like what the graph was. So what I did, I erased it and redrew it. The math is like that. Sometimes you don't like what you started, you want to start over, you erase it and start over. But most people don't like to do that because it takes extra time. Same thing with writing a paper though. You get your first draft down, that's supposed to be your first draft, okay? A rough draft is not supposed to be your final draft, but a lot of students don't want to take the time to go back and fix it, so they just turn it in, let the teacher do whatever, okay? that's something as a student you got to figure out. How much time do I need to take to get the problem right? And what is right? Well, right is when the teacher looks at it, gives it back to you, and gives you an A. That's what we're shooting for, is an A. Anything that's an A, you did it right. If you didn't get an A, ask yourself, what did I miss? Why did I miss it? What do I have to do next time to change my grade from what I got to make it an A? In math, it's the same way. Science, the same way. Any subject. Well, here we go. You saw me go over this and redo the graph, do some extra points. It's a feel thing. You kind of get an idea of what is easy to do, what you can do. Maybe it's not easy, maybe you don't want to do it, but maybe you have to do it. Some graphs maybe need 20 points. So maybe you've got an XY table that's 20 points long to figure out what's going on. You just have to kind of do what's necessary. Here's the x equals minus b over 2a way though. Hopefully this example helps you to see how to graph a quadratic using that. And the last video I did, I showed you how to use factored form. Well, factored form wouldn't work here. That's one reason I did it this way. So now you have two different ways to do it. Factored form minus b over 2a will work if it factors as well. So if it factors and you have this, now you got two choices. But either way, now you got two different methods to do it. Factored form, if that works, minus b over 2a anytime. XY tables are very good. You need to get good at XY tables. If you're having trouble with that, that's something that you'd want to practice. Anyway, this has been Mr. Hanna with What the Format. Thank you for watching and happy mathing.